Apothecary Podcast. Authentic chat about medicines, pharmacy and healthcare in the UK.
Pharmacists Jamie, Gimmo and STC take on topical and controversial stories but keep it edgy yet light-hearted.
Pod guests share their desert island drugs and joyful patient stories.
Welcome to the Oral Apothecary Podcast. My name is Jamie Hayes. Coming up in today's episode, we're joined by Lisa Green. Lisa is an award-winning medicine safety specialist with a pharmacy career spanning over 20 years. We will welcome Lisa in a moment as she gets to share her desert island drug, her career anthem, and recommend a book for the Oral Apothecary Library. After the highs and lows of our Christmas special, our micro-discussion is back with a nice and gentle look at the role of humour in healthcare. Just for clarification, and please do not write in, we do understand there is little connection between our Christmas special and the role of humour in healthcare. In a week that highlighted comedy to be prescribed on the National Health Service, we will take a look at a recent article from Harvard Business Review which asks, why does humour in the workplace sometimes have magical effects and at other times is disastrous? When is humour helpful? Keep listening for your very own laughter prescription. Talking of humour, let me welcome my two fellow apothecaries. STC is in Bournemouth and Gimmo is in Cardiff. Welcome both.
Evening.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, you all.
What have you been up to over the festive period?
The pressure's on me to tell a joke there, isn't it? But I'm not going to. save that for later. Just before Christmas, found myself suddenly back somewhere where I wasn't expecting to be, and that was back in the vaccination centres. So if someone's listened to this a few months down the line, it all went crazy in December. Well, it still is. So lots of us found ourselves back redeployed, doing stuff that we thought had finished. So big tribute to everyone who did that, because it was a big effort, a big push. I think everyone's done really well. Over Christmas, on Christmas Eve, me and the current Mrs. Gimpson went to watch It's a Wonderful Life at the cinema. So anyone who listened to the Christmas special, and I'm sure that's all of you, will remember we had a bit of a row about the name of the pharmacist in the Christmas special. It was Mr. Gower, and the argument was about what his first name was, and I just report that his first name was never mentioned. There is a pharmacist in It's a Wonderful Life, and despite seeing it a million times, I'd never really made the connection. So that was a great film. And started a new job this week. So that's exciting news for me. I've moved across to Cwmtaf Magonic Health Board, working in quality improvement, so slightly different role for me. So good start to the new year.
No better time to get a new job than the new year, is there?
Before we go on, STC, on behalf of our guests on the Christmas special, didn't they come back at you with some evidence of the name of the pharmacist?
The evidence was in the show notes and script. It was never mentioned. The name was never mentioned in the film.
Let's move on.
Okay.
Well, I'm feeling a bit mischievous tonight, if I'm honest. I've been very excited about coming back on the podcast. I found myself with a lot of time before Christmas because I thought I was going to be moving in my daughter somewhere, but in the end that hasn't happened. So I had a great Christmas, had all the family down. I might have said before, my dad's a pharmacist and my nephew also, and my wife. But if I spend a lot of time with my dad, we chat a lot, and I realised that I get quite a lot of my thoughts and ideas from my dad. And I realised that, you know how I go irate when anybody uses the word amazing? Well, my dad was having a rant about it over Christmas because everybody on the TV was using it. And I thought, it's just getting so irritating. And he said to me this one thing, and I thought he's absolutely nailed it here. He said, listen, there's only one thing that's amazing, and that's the billions of stars in the sky when you look up at night. And I thought, you're right, Dad. And anybody that brings up the word amazing in any conversation, I'm going to call them out. So watch out in 2022. That's all I'm going to say.
Does he put his foot in it quite a lot as well, Steve?
No.
Very good. Okay, highlight for me, was our family walk on the beach at Resby on Boxing Day. That was stunning. I reflected a bit about the podcast, obviously, as the year drew to a close. I've borrowed this from the Financial Times and paraphrased. It's a little piece from Rachel Connolly in the Financial Times on the podcasts capitalising on friendship. Listeners are flocking to series built on rapport, and hosts are monetising them with live shows and merchandising. What can seem a dorky medium, I'm not sure what she's talking about there, but anyway, podcasting is a growing industry. Rachel describes the Friendship Podcast. A group of friends riff on cultural topics or share gossip, with the real selling point being the banter between their hosts and their guests. She cautions, though, starting a podcast with a friend could be compared to starting a romantic relationship with one. It's a perfect idea until it isn't. As long as the stakes are low, it's not a big deal. But if you're lucky enough to have it to turn into a business, you've got to be much more on top of each other's feelings and, more importantly, egos. So, listener, with your help, we will continue to keep the stakes as low as we can, and we welcome your continued support for the year 2022.
You just reminded me, actually, the other thing that I read that was most fascinating about medicines, I suppose, over the Christmas period was, did you see that piece about the NHS has made an agreement with a company about this new drug to give to children who've got severe nut allergy? It's called Palforzia, if I've said that correctly, with a Z. And it's the first country in Europe, I think, and we're expecting it to be released in this year, in fact. And so has had some really good results in allowing young children to have peanuts without necessarily the risk of fatal anaphylaxis. So I thought that was a very heartwarming story.
Very good. My great pleasure to welcome Lisa Green to the Oral Apothecary podcast. As I mentioned, Lisa is a medicine safety specialist with a pharmacy career spanning over 20 years. She has significant background in primary, secondary and specialist tertiary care. Lisa is a multi-award winner for patient safety and leadership, as well as being named as one of the Pharmaceutical Journal's Women to Watch 2020. Aside from her day job as head of pharmacy operations for one of Europe's largest mental health charities, Lisa has further expanded her career and is a farm and animal health consultant. She has a master's degree in veterinary pharmacy and is qualified to prescribe and supply a range of veterinary medicines for avian, farm, equine and companion animals. Lisa provides comprehensive bespoke farm plans to promote positive health and welfare in animals, specialising in internal, external parasites and disease control measures. So welcome, Lisa. Look, reading that bio out, Lisa, when we talked about the podcast right at the start of last year, having somebody like you on was exactly what we were talking about, because there's so much to medicines that people don't realise. So welcome.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everybody. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. And you made me sound really good there, Jamie. So thank you.
My pleasure. What's on your agenda at the moment then, Lisa?
Oh, well, so obviously aside from the pandemic that none of us can get away from, I think so obviously going into the new year and thinking about what's next for me, I'm a bit of a crossroads because obviously, as you've said, I work in human healthcare predominantly, but obviously I've got this other part of my life, if you like, in the veterinary sector, and I need to think about what I do next. So I'm currently in the stages of applying for a doctorate, and it's what I do that in, I guess, because that would be quite key to what I do longer term. I guess the veterinary side of it, I'd love to do it in that, but actually there's quite a lot of limitations for a career in veterinary medicines, just purely because of the law. But actually for my dissertation, for my master's, I looked at the involvement of pharmacists within the animal healthcare sector. And obviously we haven't progressed into that field, because actually animals are actually really important to us, aren't they? Whether it be the companion side of it or food chain. But then on the other half, I enjoy my human healthcare work, and I'm thinking potentially about doing a doctorate in looking at the reliance and overuse of benzodiazepines, for example. So right now on my agenda is trying to work out where I go.
Isn't use of benzos in animals available for you?
Unfortunately not.
But Lisa, am I right in thinking, somebody told me this, correct me if I'm wrong, are you the only UK pharmacy technician that can prescribe veterinary medicines? Is that true?
Currently, yes.
Wow.
But I have had a few pharmacy technicians get in touch with me actually about thinking about doing the course. So hopefully we can get some more through.
So just to be clear for the listeners, so pharmacy technicians, there's no current legal way for them to prescribe for humans. So
No.
how is it different in veterinary medicine then?
Purely because of the classifications of veterinary medicines. So I don't know if you know of the kind of legal categories. So you've got POMV, so prescription only medicines, veterinary surgeon only. And then you've got POM VPS, which is obviously prescription only medicine, but you've got veterinary surgeon pharmacist and SQP. So a pharmacy technician falls into the SQP bracket.
What does SQP stand for?
Suitably qualified person.
Oh, okay. So there's a limit to what medicines you can prescribe, but you can prescribe some.
Yeah, certainly. So limitations, but effectively, I can write a prescription for a prescription-only medicine.
So what environment are you prescribing in there? Because that doesn't sound to me like you're in a traditional vet surgery or a vet's office, or is it in some sort of animal centre, or, is it?
No. So obviously I could set up my own veterinary premises and I could get authorisation from the VMD. But at the moment, obviously I go onto farms, I do a comprehensive farm plan with them, and I provide them with the prescription so they can obviously go into a community pharmacy or online and kind of obtain the medicine that way.
Is it fair to say that most people do online veterinary medicine prescriptions these days or not? How does it?
To be honest, yes, they do. There's a few online pharmacies that specialise in kind of farm. So without giving any names away,
Sure.
You could Google pharmacy if you like.
Well, I don't know if you've listened to any of our previous episodes, but we have had the odd spat talking about the cost of veterinary medicines for our pets.
It is an expensive business.
You most got a current one, haven't you?
I've just spent 85 quid on my cat, and they gave them meloxicam for a mouth ulcer, which I'm still not convinced about, but there we go.
But you don't begrudge the cat, do you? You paid it.
I mean, so one thing that sounds fantastic about that, I mean, it sounds fantastic. I imagine it's not as glamorous as it sounds. Going out to farms and prescribing, I imagine, that's an experience that not virtually no one else in the pharmacy profession has had, I would imagine.
No, I mean, there are some specialist pharmacists out there. I guess it depends on where in the country you are to whether there's a market, I guess. But although obviously, it's great that you can write a prescription and you're looking at the whole medicine side. When you're doing a health plan, you're looking at so many other things as well. So like their biosecurity measures, lots of other things, not just the medicines.
All right, so it's quite a holistic piece of work then.
Does that include antimicrobial stewardship in relation to animals?
Yes, but that kind of goes in conjunction with the vet mainly. So I will be looking at their vaccination plans, and I'll be looking at the kind of endo and ectoparasites. So different farms will have different issues, I guess. But I guess the main disease priorities are things like lameness, clostridial diseases, liver fluke. You've got the welfare issues of like sheep scab, blowfly, all that type of thing, that all can be, treated and prevented with POM VPS products.
And do you have a nice pair of red Barber wellies or something like that?
I've got some beautiful coral hunter wellies.
There you go.
I was going to say, this has taken me back to, I think it was Dr. Mark Porter, wasn't it? His book choice was It Shouldn't Happen to a Vet, which I'd read as a kid as well. That's what I'm imagining it's like. I'm sure it's not.
It's not that glamorous, but you can make it sound all right.
So if you decide to do the benzos in humans aspect, then will you leave the animal side behind completely then? Will that?
I don't think so. Because I enjoy that. It's just because of the restrictions with the law. Obviously, everything that you do at the moment can't contravene the Veterinary Surgeons Act 1966. The law's never been changed. If you think about the progression in human healthcare, so you think about what pharmacists, nurses, how your careers have evolved with independent prescribing, all that jazz. That's not the same in the veterinary world. The veterinary surgeons still have the monopoly on the entire sector. So although I enjoy doing what I'm doing, the limitations are still there.
That's interesting. So what you're saying there is we haven't had the same battles with veterinary medicines that we've had with human medicines. And so there's an opportunity there maybe, because it should have changed, shouldn't it? Because people out there are differently qualified than they were in the 60s. And so veterinary medicine should change to adopt to that. And maybe that links to what we talked about earlier about why it seems restrictive and expensive compared to other healthcare.
It's what matters to the animals, isn't it?
Yeah. How do you have a shared decision-making process with an animal? I think that's where Jamie's going.
So why benzos though, Lisa? Why in particular benzos if you decide to?
I guess purely because I do think there's an over-reliance on the use of them. And I'm not blaming anybody for that. But if you think about, certainly in an organisation, that I work in where it's very, very high use of them, I guess are the doctors, are the nurses under pressure to administer, prescribe? I think that's the kind of thing I'd be looking at. Are professionals intimidated to?
Can I save you the time of 5 years on a doctorate then? And hasn't that been done already?
Probably, and that's why I need to come up with a very good title. And if I decide to do that,
well, maybe that's the issue, Jamie, isn't it? Is it has been done. And we've talked loads of times on this podcast about how we keep coming round and round and round. So why is it still a problem is the subject of the PhD, isn't it? And why hasn't it changed? Because from what I understand, it's less of a problem, but it's still a big problem, isn't it? Steve, you see a lot in surgery, do you? I don't know.
I guess the sorts of patients that Lisa's talking about are probably quite different to what I'm seeing in general practice. But I would say that in general practice, we are still, if you like, a bit like all over-prescribing, I suppose. We're dealing with what's gone before. So we've still got plenty of people who are so dependent on it that it's so difficult to get some of them off. And I think what we focus on now is trying hard not to give people those drugs or if we do, be quite upfront and say, this is a short-term course. They won't be going on repeat prescription. And because I don't want to be coming back here in 2 years' time, having a conversation with you about unpicking something that happened 2 years ago, where I need to give you these now to help you. But we don't want to be having this conversation about you then becoming dependent on them in 2 years' time.